Hi, good morning. I'm Mike Doran, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, where I also am in charge of our Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. And it's my great pleasure and honor today to host Noach Hacker. He is the Minister for Economic Affairs at the embassy. And he has a distinguished, at the Israeli embassy, and he has a distinguished background in economic issues. He was the deputy director of the budget department in the Ministry of Finance. He was a senior executive at a telecommunications firm, and he's here today to help us understand, work through some of the economic questions that we have about the war. I am approaching this as a seminar in economic issues. We're seeing so many headlines, Noach, about the war and about the economic implications, and I'm looking to you to help me make sense of it all. It's what I'm seeing in the headlines is doom and gloom, and I'm hoping that you're going to come to tell me that it's not as doomy and gloomy as it looks.
So, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here again. I think there's no question that this war had put an economic burden on the Israeli economy. That's not a question. We see it in growth. That growth was projected to be higher than it is now. And we see it in expenses. The expenses of this war are by far the highest we have ever seen in war. We're talking about 250 billion shekels over the years 2023 to 2025. So it's a burden. But if I would ask you how much did the Israeli economy grow in 2023, you'll be surprised to hear that we grew by 2%. Which is relatively high in the world.
I did not know that.
And also in 2024, a year of war, if I would ask you, you'll probably say, with all these reports and all these headlines, you're probably suffering from negative growth. No, even the Moody's report, even the downgrade reports are talking about positive growth in 2024 for the Israeli economy. Still positive growth. So I think, and another thing I wanted to tell you that I was here last in about a year ago. You had me over to talk just after October 7th. And if you would invest in Israel, last time I was here, now you'll be up by 30% on your money if you would invest it in our stock market. And from the last time I was here, I just checked before coming in. So Israel's economy is very strong.
Unfortunately, I don't have money to invest. But I'm going to ask you before we end today, I'll ask you for some investment advice for our viewers. Now, but let me stop you there because you mentioned the Moody's thing. So Moody's downgraded you. I wrote it down before I came here from AA to Baa1. Now, I do not understand what this means, but the news articles told me that it was very bad news for you. So you're saying it's not as bad as it sounded. But first of all, what does it mean to go from AA to Baa1?
So I can tell you two things. First of all, there's several rating companies rating Israel. There's S&P, Moody's, Fitch, and they're not all the same.
But S&P also downgraded you, didn't
S&P downgraded us, but still kept us on an A level. And Moody's are the only one till now downgrading the Israeli economy lower than an A level to what's equivalent to BBB+, like the next level after A. I think on one hand you can understand, well, there's a regional war going on, and it's a regional war. It's not a war between Hamas and Israel. This is clearly a regional war. So you understand the uncertainty. But again, even if you take a look at those reports, you see they're all talking about Israel growing as an economy. Another thing.
But help me to understand because assume I want you to help the average person out there who's trying to make sense of the news to understand what does this mean. So suppose that I'm sitting in a financial house in New York and I see the downgrading from Moody's. What does that say to me?
So first of all, as you know, the private sector is the private sector and it works on its own. The rating companies only give indications. So when a government wants to go out and raise debt, we have a lot of expenses. Now it grew by 250 billion shekels. We want to raise debt. And when we come to the market to raise debt, like you have a credit rating with your bank, they're global rating companies that rate the Israeli economy. And with that rating, we go to raise debt from the world, from the Israeli markets, and from the US, for example, the US market. And people look at that rating while deciding if they want to buy our debt and how much do they expect to be paid for our debt if they want to buy it. So of course it has an effect, but I can tell you something. If we'll measure it by the actions of the market, just a couple of days after Moody's released their downgrade, Israel issued out debt of about 4 billion shekels. About 4 billion shekels. It's a regular thing happening weekly basis. The demand for Israeli debt in the market was 3 times the amount we issued out. And that has a reason, because when you measure debt, like the rating companies, and they mentioned that as well, you try to measure the ability of a country to pay it back. And if you look at the Israeli financial situation, we have some of our debt we issue internally in Israel for our pension funds and such. And some of the debt, we do it on a global arena in the US and such. And that's debt in dollars. That debt in Israel is about 17%, only 17% of our debt is external, and it's about $50 billion. Against that $50 billion, we keep reserves in our central bank of $220 billion. So even this Moody's report, its bottom line is, for their opinion, that there's no way that Israel is not repaying her debt. So we're super stable. The way to measure...
So what does it mean then, if the downgrading is? It says that because of the war and because of the potential for the war to continue, there's a little bit of risk that wasn't there otherwise?
Yeah, I think
it's just risk of war. Is that
It's the risk of war. They're all mentioning that. They're mentioning some other small risk, but it's mostly, if I take the whole rating companies together, of course, the most relevant issue is the war. And the fact that it's not only a war between Israel and Hamas, it's a regional war.
Now, it seems to me, it's a little bit, I'm a little bit uncomfortable to ask this question, but it has to be a real economic question. There are economic benefits to the war. And I mean, Israel has showcased military systems that are going to be in much greater demand as a result. There are, nobody's going to want to buy any pagers made in Israel, but they might want to buy anything related to missile defense and so on. And so the long-term potential of Israeli defense industries, it seems to me, have been actually enhanced by the war. Is that a fair assessment? And I mean, it's uncomfortable to talk about war in that way, but we have to be realistic.
I'll say it in 2 things. First of all, 2023 was a record year for the defense industry in Israel. We're talking about $13 billion of 2023. And I think 2024 will be a good year too. Most of it, I think it's not only the Israeli war, it's also what's going on in Europe and the demand for defense products.
Right.
But you need to understand something about Israel. It's not only the missile defense systems that have showcased in the last year, especially in the Iranian attacks. It's also to take a high-tech country, an innovative startup country, and combine it with the army. And that's what we do in Israel, because you have all these reserves that their day jobs are to invent things, high-tech things and technological gadgets, and then you take them and put them in the army for some time, you get a lot of new innovations. And I think that's the real economic boost that can come out of this war, when all these reserves are going to go back to their work, right, and their high-tech companies. Then we'll see surge of innovation that will be used not only in defense industries, but also across different industries. And we see that in medical solutions for soldiers, for injured soldiers that after that we're gonna use probably in a lot of extreme situations in hospitals or things like that. And the war gives you a chance that, as you said, it's hard to talk about war as a positive thing, but during war, you use a lot of technologies and you run a lot of different stages of technologies that in regular time you wouldn't use because you don't need to or you don't have to. But now we have that experience and we see them coming along, especially if we're talking about the laser project with the US, as you know, which we hope will
This is the so-called Iron Beam, which is going to be the next stage of missile defense.
Exactly.
And the Iron Beam is going to come online when? I saw Yuval Steinitz the other day he said 1 year, but a year ago they were saying 1 year. So actually a year ago they were saying 6 months.
Yuval was my minister when I was deputy director in my time in the budget department, so I won't contradict him, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see.
You think it's imminent?
I think when you put a lot of abilities and economic strength, this is a joint project with the US, and put it in a situation when you have to succeed, then you see the Israeli innovation working very, very well. We have a lot of experience in that situation.
Can you talk, since we're already on the subject of armaments, you've got a budget coming up, a 2025 budget process. When does that begin?
It already began. We need to approve the budget in the government by the end of this month.
And it will be approved now, I think, there's a 68.
We have to approve it.
Yeah, so there must, what impact has the war had on the budgeting process? And I'm not talking about in terms of debt and questions like that, but in questions of changing the priorities because of new defense requirements. What are are there going to be more tanks or more planes, more artillery ammunition? How is this affecting the budget?
So I'll start with the macro level and then go down. Israel, I think for the beginning of the 2000s, have been working very hard to keep a very strong and a very responsible fiscal policy going, and that's what took our debt to GDP, and that's how you measure a country's ability to pay off her debts. You look at what she produced, the GDP, against the money she owes, the debt. And that came down in Israel from about 100% in the early 2000s to just before this war, 59%. That's the lowest we've been. And that's how we started.
How does that compare to other developed democracies in the
OECD average? I'm not talking about the U.S. The U.S. is a very strong economy. It has its own.
We're weird. So
you're over 100%, but also the OECD average is over 100%. So Israel's been preparing for exactly these extreme situations by keeping a very, very strict and very responsible fiscal policy, and that comes into account in the budget. How? The budget decides on the deficit. That deficit goes into the debt and makes the debt higher if you have deficit. You know, a year before this war, we had a surplus because we wanted to prepare ourselves for extreme situations. We want to keep our debt low. But even after a year of war, now we're lower than 70% debt to GDP. And as I said, if you're comparing us to OECD countries, we're way lower, way lower. And even the rating companies mentioned that as a very big strength of the Israeli economy. So if you take a look at 2025 budget and you want to keep this fiscal responsibility that we have to keep, we're talking about a deficit of 4%. Why 4%? Because all the projections for the Israeli economy in 2025 is about 4.5% growth. And when you have 4.5% growth and 4% deficit, you're keeping your balance in the debt to GDP ratio, and that keeps the debt to GDP under 70. So if you want to keep that that whole of keeping your debt to GDP at the same level as it is. So you have to work everything inside the budget. And we have two forces in the budget coming up. It's not only defense. Defense will come up significantly. It's also financial costs. Because as we mentioned, the rating companies downgrading us and actual debt becoming bigger, then you pay more interest on your debt if the debt is bigger. So these two forces are coming up, and then you have to manage the entire budget in order to keep that 4% goal of deficit.
I would have thought that. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Yeah, you can.
I would have thought that all of the men in reserves, men and women in reserves, would be a huge drain on productivity. Is it not?
You know, Israel is, we call it, there's a song that talks that we're a nation of superheroes. That everybody has his day job, but then he takes off his suit and puts on his superhero suit and goes to fight. And I'll give you one example that I talked about lately. My son, a 9th grader, he's in a math program in Bar-Ilan University. And he's doing
a 9th grader in university.
Yeah, he's doing. He's good at math.
Is he going to a normal high school and then he goes to a program in math at Bar-Ilan for talented?
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay. And he's not going. He didn't go to college at.
No. You know. So because we're here in the States, he's doing the classes but virtually. And I went by his room to see how it's going to him, and I see his teacher on the other side of the computer wearing his uniform, and some army vehicle going in the background.
He's teaching the class from the.
And I'm asking him, "What's going on?" And he's saying, "Oh no, our teacher was called into reserves, but he's still teaching us." And I don't know if you know it, the army set up in army bases, we work tents for high-tech reserves to open up their computers, connect to their clients and companies, and continue on the work.
No, I was not aware of that. No.
So Israel is a very, very resilient. You know, S&P rating company actually mentioned that in the report, last report, saying that the strength of the Israeli economy is the high-tech sector, which allows you to work from home, from far than, and not from the office.
Remotely, even if you're in southern Lebanon. Yeah.
You know, everything we laugh about it, that everything you need to export high-tech services is a computer and a sandwich. So we're the economic is very. It's an
amazing world.
Yeah, very resilient. It's not the same place we were before, but again, it's not something you can sustain forever. But the effect is actually lower than you would think on the economy.
Although it is clear to me, I think, or I'm certain it's clear to me. I'm not sure it's clear who sees it this way and who doesn't. But it's clear to me that Iran is waging a war of attrition with you, and one of their major goals in the war is actually to wear you down economically. How much of an awareness of that is there among Israelis in general, but especially among the Israeli elite?
I think this war has shown very clearly that war today is not just a war between armies. This war, almost from the start, was an economic war. You saw it with the Houthim, the Bab el-Mandeb corridor, trying to prevent goods from coming into Israel through the Red Sea. You saw it with Turkey announcing a boycott on Israel.
I'm sorry, from this podium, we don't say any critical things about Turkey.
So you shouldn't have me over.
No.
But again, the effect, so we truly understand it. We truly understand it. But I think you need to understand something about the Israeli economy also. We've been preparing for this fight economically. Our huge amounts of reserves, our financial situation has been built in a way to prepare us for extreme situations. So, and of course, our relationship with the U.S., our economic relationship with the U.S.
I fully understand what you just said, but I think it's safe to say, and I'm asking, I'll make this a statement, but it's a question. No one on October 8th or 9th or 10th would have imagined that the Houthis would shut down commercial shipping through the Suez Canal, and that would become part of that the Iranian resistance axis would use its ability to influence the global economy as a tool in the global ceasefire movement to save Hamas. That's a fair statement, no?
So I don't know. I can tell you that, let's say, for us, in the Ministry of Finance, no, we didn't see that as the likely scenario or something like that. But I can tell you again about the structure of the Israeli market, that even in that way, Iran mostly disturbed global trade, not the Israeli economy. It mostly disturbed the Egypt economy, lowering traffic in the Suez Canal from about 75 ships a day to 20. It disrupted the Lebanese economy by deciding to attack Israel from Lebanon. The IMF released something about it just a couple of days ago, talking about how the Lebanese economy struggled or even before the war, but after the war started, the struggle has become very, very hard. The boycott by Turkey is hurting Turkish economy more than it's hurting Israeli economy, because they export to us more than they import from us. So they get hurt more. And I can say that even with Turkey, that we had some construction projects that they were a big part of the Israeli market. Turkey was a big part of the Israeli market. The change, the switch to different countries went pretty fast. And we see, I think in the last index of prices on construction, that costs have not gone up.
No, I take your point about the strength of the Israeli economy, but there is a tool here that the Iranians have, and it mainly it's a way of putting pressure on the United States. So
not only the United States,
but if you put pressure on the Egyptians, then what do the Egyptians want? They want ceasefire in Gaza so they can get they can open up the Suez Canal again, or the traffic through the Suez Canal. So everyone who's affected is going to put pressure on the United States to say, do something about this. And the thesis of the Biden administration from day one has been ceasefire in Gaza will give us, will reopen all of these economic lanes.
So again, I don't want to comment on why they're doing what exactly the policies. I can tell you that, President Biden and the G7 announced the IMEC project 2 years ago. The IMEC project is supposed to connect India.
IMEC is also called I2U2, right? India, Israel, US, UAE.
Yeah, but it goes through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel, and connects India to Europe. And it's been called many names, this project, corridors for many, many names. But this is the current name, and this is the current announcement of the G7. And even, I think, in this visit with the president of the UAE, met with President Biden a couple of weeks ago, they reaffirmed their belief in this project and the good effect that it can have on regional economy. This corridor is supposed to give an alternative for the corridor, for the sea corridor. This is a land corridor. And we actually see that the biggest effect, I think, on the Israeli economy that the Houthis' attack is to make this corridor more safe, more economically viable, and actually working. We see it now.
Can you explain what your logic is there? Why does it make it safer?
Because if you can't go through the Bab el-Mandeb corridor, you need to go through land. And if you're afraid that the Houthis will attack your ships, then you can either go around Africa and come to the Mediterranean Sea, for example, or you can grow through land. And what we actually see is from the announcement of this IMEC initiative, trade through this route to Israel through the Jordan River crossing went up by over 200%, and it originated more than half of it in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain. So you see a shift, and it's actually working. And when we actually finish this war and this project could come to light with trains and not trucks, for example, then you'll see a great, great boost for the regional economy and trade coming up. We have projections talking about the effects of this project on trade and how trade is going to grow. It's huge. And if you take a look at the future of the Israeli economy after this war, it's going to be very, very, very bright. But I think that's part of the reasons why Iran started this attack in the first place, because it understood what's coming.
I heard a very knowledgeable person, let's leave it at that, told me that one of the untold stories, good news stories of the war is Indian-Israeli cooperation. So do you want to tell us some secrets about Indian-Israeli cooperation?
I won't tell you secrets, but I can tell you that we have a lot of meetings, and we've been getting very good support from our Indian friends and counterparts here in DC and also in Israel, I know, and we look at them as a good partner to go with in the future. Part of it is the IMEC is something that's very interesting for them as well. It can help their economy, and it can create a very reliable option of delivering goods between India and Europe, and I think that's a joint interest of ours in the Middle East, U.S., and India, of course.
Beyond the secrets of the war that you won't tell us, what are the most exciting elements of and beyond the corridors, what are the most exciting elements of the Indian-Israeli economic cooperation as you see it?
So I think some of it has not been realized yet, but I truly believe, and I know you said beside the IMEC corridor, but it's not beside. This is the future. I think people don't understand the power it has. It's going to change the region. It's going to change the region. It's going to bring volume of trade and amounts that we have never seen.
I confess that I don't understand it, in the sense that it's all very abstract to me, and I see lots of other discussions out there about alternative corridors. There's a whole discussion out there in the Middle East, in Central Asia, elsewhere, about all the different possible corridors. And I don't know, as a layman, I don't know how to make sense of which corridors discussion is the...
Try to imagine, because as I said, this is a very reliable corridor, and it's mostly built. People don't know it, but it's mostly built. There's a part in Jordan that is...
You need a railway through Jordan.
You need a railway through Jordan, but
the old
the
Hijaz
Israeli
railway.
side, the port is there, the railway is almost finished. The Saudi Arabian side is also the railway, some of it is already there. So I think people, it's very close. And imagine like this huge project, how many jobs it creates, how many investments, how many different products will get to places that they've never gotten before. What it will do to the Jordan economy, what it will do to the Israeli economy, and I think that will create a very big change. And we're waiting for that to happen, because when that happens, I think all the projections of the Israeli economy, even that they were higher before, we're going to get way, way higher. You're talking about a corridor that will save 8 days of delivery. The sea corridor takes about, an average, 8 days more than the corridor that goes through land.
This is a the sea corridor when the Houthis are not
when the Houthis are not disturbing.
Yeah,
of course. So you see that those 8 days, I think, are equivalent to $8,000 of savings for shipping companies, for companies that ship their products. $8,000 every container. So imagine if you have 1,000 containers or 1,000,000 containers, what's the implications? So it's reliable, it's cheaper, and it's going to create a very big difference. And we see it already coming to light. And you know, another thing that's interesting about our partners and our economic relationship with the Abraham Accord partners, trade with EAU, Bahrain, and Morocco was in 2023 about over $3 billion. And in this first half of 2024, it all went up.
Wow, that's very interesting. One of the I think another sort of untold story in all of this is the absence of hostility to Israel from the Gulf, or no agitation, no real agitation in the Gulf for Israel to end the war. No pressure on the United States, no pressure on the Europeans. In fact, quite the opposite.
Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you that everybody that looks at what's happened now in the region understand that there's this huge Iranian force for disruption and from preventing this region from becoming stable, economically even. Imagine the Lebanese economy without Iran. Imagine what the Egypt economy without Iran. Of course, Israel's economy without Iran. So I think everybody realizes that this is not a fight between Israel and Hamas. It's not a fight between Israel and Hezbollah. We've been attacked in this war from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and of course from Iran and Gaza, of course. Iran attacked us directly. Now, we're fighting a regional war. Israel is fighting Iran. Israel is fighting Iran, and I think everybody understands that if we finish this war right, the outcome for the region and for the entire world could be very, very good. And I hope.
I think your earlier point deserves emphasis. Your earlier point being that one of the goals of Iran in this war was to shut down I2U2 or IMEC, whatever we call it. Iran is fighting for a vision of regional order against the American. It's not just against Israel. It's not Israel's regional order. It's America's regional order that Iran is fighting against. So Israel, as your prime minister said time and again, and I agree with him 100%, Israel is on the front lines for the Western order in the region, whether the West realizes it or not. But these economic questions bring that out, I think, a little bit more clearly.
I think you see it in what's going on in Lebanon. We've been targeting terrorists with American blood on their hands. That if some of them have bounties in America. You can get money if you.
Are you going to claim for those rewards?
We're talking about
everyone on social media keeps asking.
I think
$5 million each, isn't it? Was it for Ford, Sugar?
I think $7, but
$7 million.
We can do good with $5. No, okay. But of course we're very grateful for the support we're getting from the U.S. and we're getting a lot of support. And I think what you said is completely right. It's the economic order of the region. And if you want to create growth, if you want to make this region prosper, you can't allow Iran to stay and disrupt it. You can't allow it. And as you know, there are several countries in the world standing by Iran in this war, economically even. So you understand that it's not Israel against Iran. It's the civilized world, it's the Western world against Iran and its proxies and its allies. So you're in a situation when I think it's becoming, as we go on in this war and things unfold, it's becoming very clear who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, and what side everyone should be on. And I think that's right in a military sense, but it's super right in the economic sense. And just as security provides the ability to have a good economy. Economy is the power to have good army and good platforms.
Okay, so that brings us to the question of U.S.-Israeli cooperation. We're talking about economic cooperation in this conflict, and what it is, what it should be, what it might be. Why don't we start with what it is?
So first of all, the last assistance from the U.S. To Israel was very, very helpful. And I think the relations are very strong. You know, we have a joint economic development group working between the high-level economic officials in the Israeli government and the U.S. administration. It's something this year was
Joint Economic Development Group. I once served in government, so that has to be, you call it the JEDG.
The JEDG, yeah.
Yes.
And
so how's the JEDG going?
So it met this year, I think the 38th year we've been meeting, and not only we met to talk about economics, there was one day that we actually visited the kibbutzim on the south, and
you're talking about in the Gaza periphery.
In the Gaza periphery, and what we experienced, what I experienced in that encounter with our counterparts and the American administration is very good cooperations, very good statements about the joint economic working groups we have with the U.S. Some of them are on technologies, but some of them also on supply chains and investment and trade. We talked about the regional implications of this war. You know, one of the things that are more relevant now in these days is fighting terror financing. And you have to fight, if we understood something this last year, you have to fight terror financing if it's in Iran, if it's in Lebanon, if it's in Gaza, and even if it's in the Palestinian Authority, what we're seeing now. And I think in the next couple of days, you're going to hear about that, how we're trying with our American counterparts to create a new situation in the financial system of the Palestinian Authority to prevent them from financing terror.
Of course, the biggest problem, though, is the billions of dollars that are going to the Iranian treasury because of the non-enforcement of sanctions against. So I won't make you talk about that because this is you can bring it up in the JEDG, okay? But I can't let this subject go by without noting that the Biden administration is not enforcing the sanctions and has left the Iranians flush with cash in order to pursue this war. What are some of the things that you feel comfortable about talking about that the Americans might do to improve the position of Israel and the United States in this economic war with Iran?
So I think you described it very right just when you talked about the regional future, the economic future of the U.S., like the U.S. initiative for this region. And I think what's happening now in the last year or two, U.S. has been building supply chains with different countries. We see that in the DPA, the Defense Production Act, that the UK and Australia has been joined to the DPA as domestic sources. We see that in the IRA that talks differently about Mexico and Canada than other countries. We see it in the CHIPS Act that added India to ITSE just a couple of weeks ago after adding Vietnam and Brazil. So we see the U.S. working to create these groups of countries, of supply chains groups of countries. And one of the things we talked about in JEDG, and I hope that we'll see in the future, that in all of these groups of countries that are created for the future, Israel would be one of those countries. Because for now, we're not seeing that. It's true that we have a free trade agreement with the U.S., so we're in a better place than other countries. But this new world order, this re-globalization that's happening in front of our eyes by the U.S. economy to the global economy, we would very much like to see. I think it's both of us. It's not just Israel. I think also the U.S. is just something that they're working on. We would like to see Israel involved in those cooperations and for America to announce about it. And that, I think, is the strongest message you can send to Iran, because that's what they try to prevent. They try to prevent this region becoming something new, something more prosperous. And I think that message to the region, to Iran, will be very strong, and I hope that we'll reach it.
After all those pagers and walkie-talkies blew up in Lebanon, I wanted to do a podcast with Hassan Nasrallah and talk to him about the supply chain problems that Hezbollah was having. But we can't get him. He's not available. And unfortunately, there's nobody else who really understands the problem in Hezbollah who's available to talk about it right now.
So to be more serious, I think...
I'm serious.
I think that supply chains are the greatest issue that we can deal with now economically on the global level. And I think the U.S. understands that. I think Israel understands that. And I hope that will lead to better it's not a better cooperation, because the private sector is cooperating between Israel and the U.S., and everything is working. And as I said, we have a free trade agreement. But I hope that this new supply chain system that the U.S. is building will see Israel in that as well.
Yeah, in all seriousness, actually, the weaponization of the supply chain, presumably by Israel, highlights the dangers, I think, for the United States in having the Chinese so deeply involved embedded in their supply chain. And the Western world needs to think about secure supply chains as a question of war and peace. I mean, it's not simply a question of national security. It's not simply an economic question.
You know, we got a lot of questions and a lot of concerns shown to us several years ago about us not realizing the importance of screening our investments, our incoming investments, for example. And, you know, in 2016, only about 20%, 25% of investments in Israel was by G7 countries. Last year, it was 95%.
Really?
Yeah, and I think more than 75% of it was American investment.
Wow.
So
that's a very dramatic change.
There's a dramatic change going on in this.
How do you explain that? That's a question.
I think it's, first of all, a lot of things happen at a policy level in Israel.
It's primarily policy.
It's not, I don't know if it's primarily policy. Maybe it's private sector working, because we don't direct investments.
Right.
We're a private sector economy. But I'm sure that it has something to do with it. And we change. We have a committee screening investments. We have
like a CFIUS equivalent.
Like, not in the level of CFIUS, you know, you're the US. We have our level of CFIUS. And I think we see the change on the Israeli side. We actually see it by numbers, we see it. And we see it in exports control, and we see it in investment screening. And it's a very big change. And we see it also in our trading partners. You know, this last year, imports from the US went up significantly in Israel, significantly. Also export, but more imports from the US. And our trading partners are changing. For example, we're not trading with Turkey anymore, for example.
We hope that'll change.
No,
we don't have to talk about Turkey.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
This is my pet project, improving Israeli-Turkish relations. But we don't have to talk about it.
I hope you know they announced they're boycotting Israel. That's the way it started. And I think that's... and we see that
the oil still flows. All right, listen. Yeah. Unless you have anything else to add, I think this is a good place to end it.
So thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about the Israeli economy, and not from headlines, just from data and numbers. And I really appreciate it.
No, we love having you, and we love the tutorials. Thank you very much.
Thank you.